Nino-chan, miss kita.
Goro Majima is a silly sausage. That's it. That's the video. I remember going to Japan and seeing the drastic shift of culture immediately unfold in front of me. Girls in maid outfits advertising their new limited time only Anime of the Week cafe, smoking outdoors being looked down upon, while smoking indoors practically being encouraged. The repressed nature of the people juxtaposing with Japan's insane nightlife. I got into an argument with someone on the streets of Osaka. I bumped into a guy leaving an izakaya, a little mom-and-pop cafe/restaurant. I didn't understand nor speak Japanese, but I knew the basic hello, goodbye, and sorry. He was drunk. The distinct glow Asian people get gave it away. He was angry. I didn't know what he was saying, but the tone of his voice clued me in. I apologized, but it wasn't enough. There was one word he said that stuck out to me. Yakuza. I highly doubt he was. He had tattoos, but they were not the distinct ones that you would see in every Japanese crime drama. Although around an hour or two after we had both moved on, I noticed a strange man in only his underwear stalking me from around a corner. So who knows? Maybe he has connections. Disassociation, putting up a wall, or just spacing out into Neverland anytime something gets brought up, is a subconscious defense mechanism the brain uses to protect you from negative feelings. It's a very handy mechanism when presented with great stress because it allows you to just tune out and brave on. The drawback of disassociation is you're never really dealing with whatever issues are presented to you. You're just postponing, moving the goalpost, hoping to delay the inevitable flood of feelings that will wash over you when you stop postponing. In every game that came out before Yakuza 0, Majima was depicted as a lunatic with a soft spot for Kiryu. He was a villain, but as the series continued, turned into an anti-hero. Anti-heroes are inherently more interesting because you get to do all the fun stuff with that character that the main straight-laced protagonist would not do. This is kind of a moot point when you can play karaoke with anyone and have some ridiculous cutscenes to show for it. Or go to the porno store and watch chicks in bikinis creepily stare at you, as opposed to the usual opposite of you staring creepily at chicks. But this is remedied by having your protagonist do the dumbest activities in the most serious way possible, keeping the main character's personality intact, but still allowing them to do everything everyone else can. Kiryu breaking it down is a perfect example of this. You can do the dancing minigame with Majima, and it would be perfectly in character for him. But having the Chad Virgin Kiryu absolutely tear up the dance floor with the most stone face you can imagine is a perfect way to have your serious character do dumb things in a way that works. In Yakuza 1, Majima is really just a villain. A funny villain, a villain with a softer side to him, as we come to find out over the series, but a villain nonetheless. He fights Kiryu not because of a hate he feels for him, but for an admiration of his strength of character and, well, physical strength. He goes out of his way to help Kiryu, if only for the purpose of creating a stronger opponent to try and beat later. Majima is also acting, which is what the crux of this video is going to be about. Impressive displays of maniacal chaos notwithstanding, Majima is a man that figures out crazying the crazies is a viable tactic. This is a tactic that works in a dog-eat-dog world like Yakuza's, but how long until you're out of crazy? How long until an even crazier psycho comes and takes your spot? How long until the veil is dropped and people see you for who you really are? What happens to the trauma left in his mind whenever he disassociates and turns into the mad dog? Well, he inflicts it on others, obviously. The Mad Dog is a mask, quite like the one tattooed on his back. This Hanya tattoo generally represents an envious, angry, sometimes sorrowful demon. Here in the West, tattoos are often a fashion. There are people who think and actually get something meaningful to them, but to each his own. In Japan specifically, however, there is an important distinction the people make. Tattoos used to be used as punishment for criminals back in the good old days until around the Edo period. While still being used as punishment, small decorative designs would sometimes be made. For example, a couple's tattoo that would show the full art when both hands would join. The artistry stuck with them, and after some collaboration with woodblock artists, Irezumi was born. It was looked down upon, but the concept exists now in the land of the rising sun, and there's nothing you can do about it, much to our dismay. The difference between tattoo and irezumi really just comes down to different styles of tattoos, but Japan sees a tattoo as fashion, but irezumi as something a lot more deeply rooted and personal to both the Japanese as a whole and the specific person with the irezumi. It tends to tell you a story. Majima is an angry but deep down sad person stuck in a cycle of violence that has to keep escalating lest the veil be dropped and his true self be revealed. Wonder why he picked that weird demon mask? Stopping all the serious talk for a second, Majima as a wildly bipolar character works so well within Yakuza's universe, and this is due to the astonishingly fine-tuned storyline over the years. Introducing a character like Majima as an almost cartoon villain gets the audience interested immediately. Now that you have their attention, you get them hooked on the story. Maybe throw in a few gags to keep it lighthearted, like this. What were we talking about? Oh yeah. Once they're hooked, you drop the bombshell. You try to assassinate a rival gang, you get caught and tortured before you make it there, and your friend goes to prison for it. And we later find out that the guns were loaded with rubber bullets and they were both set up. People betraying you left and right. You get married to an 18-year-old, get her pregnant, and she decides to abort the baby without telling you. You put up walls to avoid yourself getting hurt emotionally, and it spirals to the point where you lay awake at night thinking about it because alone is the only time you're comfortable with being vulnerable. Fine. Let's switch gears for a second. If Yakuza as a series was serious all the time, characters like Majima would clash with the tone in such a way that it takes away from the experience. Imagine trying to watch The Dark Knight, but instead of Heath Ledger playing the Joker, you got Sacha Baron Cohen. Already having a bipolar approach to the game, how they switch in the snap of a finger between a very heartfelt scene and winning a chicken named Nugget after a bowling minigame that doubles as a manager for the real estate minigame, it makes perfect sense to put a character in that initially almost seems cartoonish, but then pull the rug out from under our feet. When Majima takes off the mask, around the few he feels he can do so, we see a very broken man, still burdened by his past. A man who values honor and respect, but barely receives any. You could argue he's given up. He himself argues nobody around them seems to know the difference between right or wrong, and he'd be better off being the craziest of them all instead of his true self. Although he phrases it under the veil of having more fun, to deflect any notion of his transformation being for more personal reasons than he lets on. There's a scene in Blackadder Goes Forth that gives a similar perspective. As the enemy advances towards them, Baldric claims he has one last plan to save themselves, to which Blackadder replies,
Really, Baldric? A cunning and subtle one?
Yes, sir.
As cunning as a fox who's just been appointed Professor of Cunning at Oxford University?
Yes, sir.
On the signal, company will advance!
Well, I'm afraid it'll have to wait. Whatever it was, I'm sure it was better than my plan to get out of this by pretending to be mad. I mean, who would have noticed another madman around here? Good luck, everyone.
I didn't think I'd ever get to talk about Blackadder in a video, but here we are. The loudest dogs usually don't bite, so how far can you go by just barking louder than the rest? If crazy is the new normal, which in the world of organized crime it would be, are you setting yourself up for failure when you try and act like the craziest? Because there's always going to be someone else who will want to try and take your spot. Realistically, Majima only ever had one real motivation: reuniting with his oath brother Saejima so that Saejima could punish him for the assassination gone wrong. But because of the amount of hoops he has to jump through, that motivation slowly morphs over time due to the people he's now forced to interact with. Nishitani, Lee, and Sagawa are all driving forces for Majima's eventual Mad Dog persona. Wenhai Lee is a man that stops at nothing to protect those he loves. Sagawa is described by Majima as practically immortal, giving a taste of the power and influence behind his meek stature. And Nishitani loves bitches. These are three equally good character traits, but if you've played Yakuza 0, you know how their story ended. And if you haven't, why the fuck did you click on this video? What? The influence these people had on Majima is very evident, as over the course of his interaction with them, he takes some of their personality traits but turned them up to 11 for his persona later on. The Mad Dog has learned a new trick. He hasn't gone insane, as some people would like to believe. The things that happened to him could and very much would drive most people insane, but acting a lot more crazy than you really are can be a good vehicle to let some of that steam off that would otherwise cause you to explode. In Yakuza Kiwami, Majima argues, what's the point of doing the right thing since it's going to break you eventually? Which is a fair point to make. Eventually, you are going to stop placing your hand on the stovetop because you've developed pattern recognition and come to find out that hot equals ouchies. Why even bother with the real you when the fake you gets results? But again I ask, how long until the mask slips off? When is your trick no longer effective? Can you learn another and up the ante? You can't replace your face with the mask entirely, and as the series progressed, Majima realizes that, and the facade slowly starts fading. It was never really him. It was the Mad Dog. Majima as a character is a masterclass in acting and a tragic character study when delving deeper into him. On the surface, seeming like a complete psychopath, but as the world of Yakuza got more fleshed out, so did Majima's character, and the writers did an excellent job of getting him out of a corner he could have been very easily stuck in, if it wasn't for the Herculean level of thought put into every aspect of the story. Yakuza in gameplay has always been kind of silly, and the story has always been played completely straight, but the writers could have easily stuck to the Joker-like shenanigans that Majima became known for and just had him stay that way. But they took the effort to give him that little bit of character and little character moments in the first game that show you that this is more than just a silly psycho, only to build upon that more and more as the series progressed, ultimately concluding with arguably one of the most tragic characters in the series. Thanks for watching. I want to aim at making these condensed, but still allow myself to explore these topics relatively in depth. I don't want to waste your time with just a bunch of rambling, but in order to properly delve into why things work, there needs to be some setup and examples. There are going to be weird tangents, but I promise they get to a point. I could bring up all kinds of very specific scenes and talk about the camera angles, voice directing, etc., etc. But for one, I'm not an expert on cinematography nor voice directing, and it feels like wasting your time. Because besides certain moments that add to the point of the character, spending time looking through every little side mission or scrubbing through every single Yakuza game for more and more scenes to add to my point, I don't think it's that necessary. I would love to spend hours just talking about these topics and go autistically in depth about it, but I would rather spark an interesting debate and encourage you all to delve into the topics you care about, over being the be-all and end-all of media knowledge. I'm not. I can just convincingly string sentences together to make you think I know what I'm on about a little bit. See you in the next one. Mwah.